AVR, today's best country.
You will know him as Fearless Fred. You can watch him on Teletoon at night. Got to welcome Fearless Fred to the AVR Morning Show. How are you, Fred?
I'm fantastic.
Not many people know you used to live in the Annapolis Valley. You're living your dream job right now. A #1 radio show in Toronto, plus you're on Teletoon at night. What course did you have to take in high school to get where you are now, Fred?
I actually went to Horton down on the side of the highway. There was a communications technology course I took when we first moved to the new high school, because I was part of the graduating class of the first new school. We had a speaker system set up in the hallways of the school, and I started the radio club. I doubt it even exists anymore, but yeah, we used to play music during lunch hours and stuff.
But did you take law, English? Was math a big thing for you?
Dude, I was terrible at math, and I wasn't very good at sciences either. I was decent in biology because I really found it an interesting course. I think English is the most important skill that you can take if you want to get into broadcasting, because your comprehension, being able to read efficiently, people don't really get how important of a skill reading is. I'm a huge advocate of child literacy on the air and telling people to read to their kids, because I really think reading to your kids is the most important thing you can do as a parent.
Now, you actually went to PostSecondary here in the Annapolis Valley at the NSCC Kings Tech campus. Dave Bannerman, who used to work here at AVR, what'd you think of that course, Fred?
When I was taking it, I didn't like it at all. I found myself really frustrated because, it's college, and a lot of the people that are going there, they're going there because they want to go to college and do that whole college thing. Whereas I went there because I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go into radio, and I thought all the time that I was spending learning things about like TV technical stuff, like how to program a vector scope and all these inside TV things that no one aside from a technical TV worker needs to know. I was like, this is a waste of my time and money. I caused myself a lot of grief because I had this idea in my head that once I finished school, I'd be working in the radio world, and I'd be surrounded with all these people that were like-minded and wanted to get ahead and be successful just like I did. And in reality, I couldn't have been more wrong. College was a perfect microcosm of the working world. There's people you don't get along with, but trying to run away and not deal with them isn't going to make the situation any better. You're just prolonging your suffering.
Well, you know what? I know in this broadcasting job, it's got a lot of risks involved in it. And when you started, you went down a bit of a rough road there, Fred, but you stuck with it. Really shows your determination for what you really wanted to do. You know what?
My very first on-air gig was overnight at AVR, just so you know. You're aware. Speaking of risks, I didn't know how to pronounce Shadaisy properly. I called them She-Daisy. I got in trouble for it. But anyway, I got fired from my first few stations. Actually, up in Port Hawkesbury, I was working there for a while, and I got fired after about 7 months because I had this ego. And when you get a little bit of success early, you tend to make a fool of yourself. And that's what I did. And my ego kind of got a bit out of control, and I got let go, and I deserved it because I was kind of an idiot. And then I went on, and I went and moved to Northern Ontario, and it was just, that station in Northern Ontario was just like an awful place to work. The guy who was programming it was this guy. My first day on the job, he goes, and I'll never forget it. I remember what I was wearing. I was wearing one of my Rage Against the Machine shirts when he says this. He goes, you're not really talented, and you don't have a very good voice. So this is probably as far as you're ever going to make it in broadcasting. Oh. And the sooner you learn to accept that, the happier you'll be as a person. And I remember that, and I'll never forget it. And I'd just been fired from a station for having this huge ego, so I really bought into it. I stayed there for 2 awful years. It was a terrible place, and I think subconsciously I was trying to get myself fired, and eventually I did get fired. And it wasn't because I had an attitude or was causing problems. It was because I was making these mistakes, like technical mistakes. I would forget to turn the logger tape. And for anyone who don't know about radio, you used to have this logger tape, a big reel-to-reel tape that would record everything. And if you don't change that tape every day, the station can get in a lot of trouble. And I didn't change it. Repeatedly, when I'd leave the station, I wouldn't change it. I got in so much trouble for it. And so, eventually they're like, sorry, you screwed up too many times, you're fired. And I remember the next morning, I was a little bit upset that night, but the next morning I was like, oh, so relieved I don't have to go in there anymore.
Well, what is it like now, Fred? Because you get up in the morning, you have a #1 radio show in Toronto, plus you're on Teletoon at night. What's it like to live that dream job every day?
You know, it's funny. My dream job was to work in Edmonton and do Drive at the Bear, and that was my goal, and I wanted to work there. I'd always said, you know, when you're starting out, you're like, I'm going to do this. Like, you have these really outlandish, huge ideas, and mine was to work at the Edge, but my real goal was to work at the Bear. And when I achieved that goal, I kind of sat there wondering what was next. I'm like, well, what's next? Let's keep going. You know, let's try and go farther. I'd been applying at Toronto, like just sending in stuff like my demo tape for like 2 years, and no one was replying, and I'd kind of written it off as from ever happening. And so then, out of the blue, it seemed, I got a phone call from one of my friends who goes, so Ross Winters, the program director, he knows who you are and wants to call you to talk to you about doing afternoons. Is that okay if I give him your number? And I was like, well, absolutely, it's okay if you give him my phone number. So he called me up, and I came out here with the idea of when you come to Toronto, anything's possible. Like, anything you want to do in media is in Toronto. And it's not like it's my favorite city in the world, but you've got to be kicking yourself to think that there's a city in Canada that has more opportunities than Toronto does. So when I came here, the idea was to start doing more voice work, start doing more TV stuff, just trying to do it. Because I'd done a lot of like community television stuff in Edmonton or roundtable discussion shows where I'd get into arguments with angry old conservatives. It was good times. But here, it's like, it's a lot going on. I'm very, very, very busy right now.
Well, it sure sounds like it, Fred. If someone came up to you right now and asked you for advice, like how do I get into radio and TV, what would you say to them?
Well, it would really depend how old they were. Like if they were young, about to go into college or in college and wanted to get into the business, I would just tell them straight up, you know, like go take a course. One thing I think is really important, and I see it happen all the time in this business, is young broadcasters, just by the nature of their being young, get really wrapped up in the whole big city cool thing, you know? Like, there's lots of guys I know that we were in school together, and they went immediately, and they went and worked at some stations that were in Halifax, and they had these really junior positions there, and they thought that going on remotes and setting up, like, the remote stuff and handing balloons to kids would somehow get them a full-time on-air gig in Halifax. And I remember being like, that just doesn't make any sense. If you want to be on air, then you got to go to a small market station and be on air. And those friends that wanted to do the whole thing in Halifax, all of them are out of the business right now. None of them even work in radio anymore because they just didn't want to do it anymore. They just left because they weren't working. They got sick and tired of 5 years later doing the exact same thing as they were when they started. I'd say that my biggest advice is go to a small market, like a small town, and at a station that will let you work. And full-time on air is the most important thing you can do if you want to be an on-air person. The only way you're going to learn to be on air is by being on air.
Well, Fred, I really appreciate you joining me on the show today, and I know I'm going to be watching you on Teletoon at night with your show there for sure, and streaming you online with The Edge.
Yes, thank you very much. It's quality programming.
Here you go. That is Fearless Fred. You can check him out on Teletoon at night and as well online on The Edge from Toronto.
APR, today's best country.